The last time I willingly attended a full family Easter brunch, I was 26 and freshly heartbroken after a long-term relationship ended in a spectacular pile-up of "it's not you, it's me" and mutual emotional burnout. This year, at 32, I had no such excuse to avoid it, and somehow I let myself be guilted into showing up, despite every instinct in my gut warning me to stay away. I'm Nate, by the way. Nate Williams. I live a relatively quiet life on the coast of Maine, where I run a small architecture firm and spend my weekends fixing up an old beach house my grandfather left to me. It's not glamorous, and certainly not flashy, but it's peaceful. And more importantly, it's mine. The beach house is going to be important, by the way. You'll see. The brunch was being hosted at my parents' place. Your classic New England colonial with white shutters, stone steps, and the kind of cold, formal energy that only came out when company was over. My mom, Beverly, thrives on appearances. If she could design a perfect life, it would involve an HGTV home tour, 3 golden retrievers, a hedge fund, and grandchildren she could dress in matching cardigans. My dad, Richard, was more reserved, but sharp as a tack and never one to say much unless something absolutely needed to be said. And then there was my brother, Kyle. Kyle. Golden boy. Family man. Father of 3. And arguably the biggest thorn in my side since the day he learned how to lie and smile at the same time. Kyle is 35 and has somehow built an entire personality around the fact that he has children. He and his wife, Hannah, are that brand of insufferably wholesome, matching Christmas pajamas, live laugh love signs, and Instagram perfect breakfasts that somehow look exactly the same every Sunday. To their credit, the kids are sweet. But Kyle? He wears fatherhood like a crown, constantly reminding everyone, especially me, that he's the one doing the real work in the family. Never mind the fact that I financially helped him twice during rough patches in his entrepreneurial journey, or that I've watched his kids more times than I can count while he and Hannah went off on couples retreats or networking cruises. Kyle's always believed that because he has kids, the world owes him a round of applause and a line of deference. And apparently, this Easter, he decided that line included my beach house. I arrived a bit late to brunch. Traffic had been brutal, and I debated turning around more than once. But when I stepped onto the porch, I pasted on my best family smile and knocked twice. The door opened almost immediately, and there was Kyle, beaming like he was running for mayor. "Nate, look who finally decided to show up." "Traffic," I said with a shrug. Sure, he said, stepping aside. "Hey, at least you don't have to wrestle 3 kids into the car. That's a whole other kind of hell." I offered a tight smile and moved past him. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and egg casserole. My mom emerged from the kitchen, flour on her cheek, and gave me a quick peck. "There you are, honey. Thought we lost you to the waves. You know I live 15 minutes away, right?" She laughed like I'd said something charming instead of mildly sarcastic, then ushered me into the dining room. The table was already full, my dad at the head, reading glasses perched on his nose, Hannah setting down a pitcher of orange juice, and the kids fiddling with their cloth napkins. I took the empty seat across from Kyle. "Started without me?" I joked, noting the half-empty mimosa glass in front of him. "We had to keep the kids on a schedule," Hannah said gently. "It's nap rotation day." I didn't bother asking what that meant. The first 20 minutes went as expected, light conversation, updates on the kids' school projects, my mom subtly probing for any signs of a new girlfriend. I answered vaguely, said work was keeping me busy, which was only half a lie. I noticed Kyle kept glancing at me between bites of quiche, eyes narrowed just slightly, like he was waiting for the right moment. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. It started with a toast. "Well," Kyle said, raising his glass dramatically after the plates were cleared, "before we get to dessert, I just want to say how grateful I am for family, and especially to Nate, my brother, who's been such a help over the years. We don't say it enough, but you've always been there." I blinked, unsure if this was sincere or sarcastic. "Thanks." He grinned. "Which brings me to something I wanted to talk about today. Something kind of exciting." "Oh no, not at the table. Not like this. I've been thinking a lot about the future," he continued. "You know, planning for the kids, building legacy, that sort of thing." My mom immediately lit up, nodding along. "Of course, yes. So important. And I was talking with Hannah," Kyle said, looking at her with an exaggerated warmth. "And we had this idea. It's kind of out there, But hear me out. The room was still. We think it's time the beach house goes to someone who's actually going to raise a family in it. There it was. No preamble. No sugarcoating. I laughed. I actually laughed, thinking he had to be joking. You mean visit it more often? No, Kyle said, still smiling. I mean live in it. You're always so busy with work and travel and bachelor stuff. You don't even use the place half the time. Meanwhile, we've got 3 kids who would love to grow up near the water. You're serious, I said flatly. Completely. Hannah chimed in, as if this had been an ongoing family discussion I just happened to miss. It would mean the world to us. And honestly, Nate, it just makes sense. My dad cleared his throat, but Kyle steamrolled ahead. You don't even have kids, Kyle added, the smile finally dropping from his face. What are you holding on to it for? Nostalgia. My jaw clenched. Because it was left to me. Granddad gave it to me. Exactly, Kyle said, jabbing his finger into the table for emphasis. He gave it to you, but he wanted it to be for the family, not to sit empty half the year while you play at being a coastal bachelor. The silence that followed was sharp enough to slice ham. My mom fidgeted with her napkin. Hannah looked smug. My dad kept his eyes on his glass, but his grip tightened just slightly. I took a breath. Then another. I'm not giving you the house, I said evenly. Kyle's smile vanished. Why not? Because it's mine. Because I've spent the last 6 years keeping it from falling apart. Because I loved Granddad, and I respect his wishes. And because I don't owe you anything, Kyle. That's when his fist hit the table. Not hard enough to knock anything over, but loud enough to jolt the kids and freeze the room. You're being selfish, he snapped. You don't even understand what it's like to have responsibilities. You're single. You have no one. You think fixing up some rundown shack makes you better than me. No, I said, standing slowly. But refusing to hand over my property because you feel entitled to it doesn't make me the villain. Hannah's voice was tight. You don't have to be cruel, Nate. I turned to her. You want cruel? Try making someone feel worthless just because they don't fit into your little mold of suburban perfection. That's when Kyle stood too, and in one sweeping motion, knocked over his glass. It shattered against the tile with a loud crack. The kids screamed. My mom gasped. My dad stood up and barked. That's enough. Kyle's mouth opened, but before he could speak, my dad pointed at him with a trembling hand. You've always been the problem, Kyle. Dead silence. My brother blinked. What? You heard me, Dad said. You've spent your whole life demanding things that were never yours to begin with. You think just because you reproduced, the world has to hand you a trophy. You're not a king. You're not even a decent son right now. Kyle looked stunned. My mom opened her mouth, then shut it. Hannah pulled the kids toward her, whispering something I couldn't hear. I took out my phone. What are you doing? Kyle asked. Calling my lawyer, I said calmly, pressing the contact. For what? I looked him square in the eye as the line rang. To initiate the transfer. It's time you all learn the truth. And that's when I walked out of the room. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in my car as a very familiar document loaded onto my phone. A document Kyle didn't know existed. Not yet. It had been 33 minutes since I walked out of that dining room and told my brother I was initiating the transfer. I hadn't driven away. I just sat in my car, hands on the wheel, staring out through the windshield as the weight of the moment sank in. My phone rested on the passenger seat, the PDF still open. Page 2 of the trust document had my name on it in bold letters, right next to a clause that Kyle had probably never even imagined existed. One line. That was all it took. But I wasn't ready to go nuclear just yet. Not until they made it absolutely necessary. I don't know why I expected anything different from that brunch. Maybe some part of me still hoped my family would finally treat me like more than a placeholder. The spare. The backup plan. I wasn't the firstborn. I wasn't married. I wasn't a parent. In my mother's eyes, those things disqualified me from being important. And in Kyle's eyes, they made me a storage locker he could raid whenever his picture-perfect life started cracking. I watched the front door from my car. Nobody came out. No one texted. No one called. I waited 10 more minutes, then turned the key and drove off. Not back to my place, but to the beach house. It was still cool that early in spring, but the sun was out, and the drive along the coast helped shake the edge off my anger. As soon as I turned onto the gravel path and saw the old cedar shingles and the wraparound porch, my chest loosened. This place wasn't just property. It was peace. It was Saturday morning pancakes with Granddad. It was helping him patch up the roof one summer while he told me stories about how he and my grandma had built it with their bare hands. He'd left it to me for a reason, and I'd kept it standing, not just structurally, but spiritually. Carl didn't know the first thing about taking care of something that couldn't be posted with a #blessed caption. I stayed at the house for the rest of the weekend. Didn't answer calls. Didn't check emails. I needed space. But when I finally returned home Monday morning and turned my phone back on, the real storm hit. 32 missed messages. 12 from Kyle. 10 from my mother. A few from extended family I hadn't spoken to in months. The subject line of one email from my mom just read, "You're being dramatic." Kyle's first voicemail came through the moment I connected to Wi-Fi. "Nate, what was that? You made a scene in front of my kids. You embarrassed me. Us? And for what? A stupid house? You don't even have anyone to share it with. Call me back. Fix this." The next one was shorter. "Okay, if this is about what I said, maybe I went too far. But you seriously need to grow up." Then came the text from Mom. "Honey, we need to talk. Kyle told me everything, and I think you're being very reactive. This family needs unity, not tantrums." A tantrum. Right. Because refusing to be steamrolled was now categorized as immature. But I didn't reply. Not yet. That night, I got an unexpected knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and sighed. It was Kyle. He had that smile on again. The one he always used when he wanted something but didn't want to ask directly. "Nate," he said as I opened the door, "can I come in?" I didn't move. Why? Because we're brothers. And because I think we both said things we didn't mean. I stepped aside, mostly to avoid a scene in the hallway. He walked in and immediately scanned the place like he was evaluating it. Like he was judging me. My walls weren't bare, but they were minimalist. My couch was a little old. My dining table was mismatched on purpose. It didn't have the Pottery Barn chic vibe he was used to. "You know," he said, sitting down, "this whole thing could have gone a lot smoother if you hadn't stormed out like a drama queen." I sat across from him. "You demanded I hand over my house because I don't have kids. What did you think would happen?" Kyle exhaled and leaned back, spreading his arms. "Look, I get it. You're sensitive. You always have been. And you've always been entitled." He raised an eyebrow. "Entitled? Me? Nate, I've earned everything I have." I blinked. "You mean the down payment Mom and Dad gave you for your house? Or the time I covered your rent when your startup collapsed?" "That was years ago." "Yeah, and I never saw a dime of it back." Kyle rolled his eyes. "It's not about money. It's about what makes sense. You live alone. You don't even use the beach house. My family needs that space. You don't need it. You want it. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You're going to die alone in that house, Nate. Is that what you really want?" It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. I stood. "You need to leave. Come on, man. Now." He left. But he made sure to drop one last line on his way out the door. "You're going to regret this." That week, the texts from my mother intensified. She asked me to be the bigger person, told me I should think about the children, and even tried to remind me how much Kyle had gone through lately with work stress. Every message came with the same underlying current. Why can't you just give him what he wants? It wasn't just about the house. It never had been. It was about control. It was about erasing boundaries. And then the betrayal came. I got a call from a friend of mine who worked in real estate. We'd gone to college together, and he now handled some properties in our area. He sounded uncomfortable. "Hey, Nate. Quick question. Did you list the beach house?" I frowned. "What? No." He hesitated. "Because someone tried to." "What do you mean tried to?" He cleared his throat. "Someone contacted our office claiming they had power of attorney on your behalf. They said they wanted to begin the paperwork to transfer ownership and eventually list it as a rental, short-term, like Airbnb stuff. But the documents didn't check out. Your name wasn't on anything they sent." My mouth went dry. "Who was it?" He said the name before I even asked. "Kyle." I thanked him and hung up. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't surprised. I was angry, so angry I felt cold. Kyle had crossed a line, and not just a petty one. He'd committed fraud, or at least attempted to. That was enough. I called my lawyer that night. Not to bluff, not to posture, but to protect myself. "I want everything documented," I told her. "I want to make it absolutely clear that no one else has any claim to the house. I want Kyle legally blocked from even approaching it. And I want to enforce the trust." She didn't hesitate. "We'll lock it down. Do you want to pursue charges? I paused. Not yet. The next day, I got a message from my dad. Just 5 words. Come by. We need to talk. He wasn't the type to send cryptic texts, and he almost never took sides. So I went. When I arrived, he was in his study, an old room with wood paneling and a dusty globe that hadn't moved in years. He gestured for me to sit and didn't say anything for a while. Just poured 2 glasses of scotch and handed me one. I saw what he tried to do, he finally said. My eyebrows raised. How? He gave me a tight smile. I have eyes. And friends. I took a sip. And I'm tired, Nate. Tired of watching your brother manipulate this family. Your mother shields him because she thinks raising a family is the ultimate virtue. But you've built something. Quietly. Honorably. And for some reason, you keep getting punished for it. I didn't speak. I wasn't used to being praised by my father. Not like that. I didn't know about the trust clause until your grandfather's lawyer called me yesterday, he continued. Smart move. That caught me off guard. Wait, he called you. My dad nodded. Apparently your grandfather anticipated this. Not necessarily Kyle, but the possibility of future disputes. That clause gives you full legal protection and blocks any third-party claim unless explicitly approved by you. It's airtight. Why didn't he tell me about it before? Because he knew you wouldn't abuse it. That was the moment it all shifted for me. The betrayal had stung. The favoritism had worn me down over the years. But now I knew. Someone in this family had believed in me. Granddad saw this coming. And he chose to protect me, even after he was gone. But I wasn't the only one with cards left to play. Because what Kyle didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the beach house wasn't just under a trust. It was under a second trust too. One that had been quietly growing in value. And it had a clause of its own. One that was about to make this whole thing a lot more complicated and a lot more public. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Not well, not deeply, but without waking up drenched in adrenaline or fury. It was the kind of sleep you get after a long fever. Not restful, but empty. And for now, that was enough. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, letting the gray light filter in through the blinds. It was a new day, and I had just hit the lowest point in my family's history. Kyle had tried to steal my house. Not just argue over it. Not guilt-trip me or manipulate me in front of the family. He had actively, deliberately, and illegally tried to assume control of my property, then had the audacity to parade around like I was the one causing problems. And Mom, she hadn't said a word about it. Not even after the attempted real estate transfer. Not when I stopped answering calls. Not when I skipped her check-in brunch the following Saturday. The silence from her side felt colder than Kyle's betrayal. At least Kyle had been open about his ambition, even if it was disguised under self-righteous garbage. My mom. Her silence meant consent. She wanted me to roll over. She expected me to give up and let Kyle win, like always. I didn't. But I also didn't lash out. I didn't retaliate. Not yet. Instead, I started building, quietly, carefully, and piece by piece. It started with the second trust. A few days after my talk with Dad, I called my grandfather's old attorney. He was retired now, but his son had taken over the practice, and he still lived in town. I asked if we could talk. In person. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. He was thinner than I remembered, hair completely white now, but his mind was sharp as ever. As soon as I mentioned the secondary trust, he smiled like I'd passed some kind of test. You're the first one to ask about it, he said. I blinked. You mean Kyle? No one even knows it exists, Nate. It was created under a different name. Your grandfather wanted it that way. I sat back, stunned. Why? He leaned in. Because he believed in planning for both war and peace. I found out that day that the beach house wasn't just a nostalgic piece of family history. It sat on a highly desirable plot of land, and over the past decade, the value of the property had quietly tripled. My grandfather had anticipated this. So he set up a second trust, one that included not just the land the house sat on, but a strip of undeveloped land behind it that had access rights grandfathered in. The second trust wasn't tied to my name publicly. It was protected, dormant, and waiting. And now that Kyle had made his move, I was legally in a position to activate it. The only thing it needed was a trigger, and Kyle had given me one. I walked out of that cafe with more than just a legal advantage. I walked out with clarity. But even with that win tucked away in my back pocket, the next few weeks weren't easy. The fallout came slowly. At first, it was just the distance, unanswered texts, the silent removal from family group chats, the absence of invitations to Sunday dinners. Then came the smear campaign. It started with a phone call from my Aunt Lisa. "Nate," she said, lowering her voice like she was about to confess to espionage. "Did you really kick Kyle's kids out of the beach house?" "What? That's what your mother said. That you showed up and told them never to come back. That you called them parasites?" I nearly choked. "Lisa, I've literally never said that in my life. I haven't even seen the kids since Easter." She was quiet. Then she sighed. "I figured. Just wanted to hear it from you." And that's when I realized the full scope of what was happening. Kyle and my mom weren't just rewriting the story. They were actively painting me as unstable, as cruel, as someone unfit to manage the legacy of the house. A few days later, I got an email from an old family friend, a pastor who had known my grandparents well. "I'm sorry to hear what's happening between you and your brother. Please know that you're all in my prayers. But if you ever want to talk, I'd be happy to help you sort through whatever pain you're carrying." Whatever pain I'm carrying. They made it sound like I was the villain of some cautionary tale. Some broken man hoarding a house out of bitterness and loneliness. That one stung. I won't lie, I spiraled a bit after that. I canceled a few work meetings. Turned down new projects. I couldn't focus. Every time I opened my laptop, I saw Kyle's smug face in my head, or my mom's disappointed frown. I knew I was doing the right thing, but it didn't feel like it. It felt like betrayal, not mine, but theirs, and betrayal always cuts deepest when it comes from people you still, stupidly, want to love you. But in that quiet spiral, something started to shift. One night, I drove to the beach house again. It was late, almost midnight, and I hadn't told anyone I was going. I just grabbed a jacket, packed a thermos of coffee, and left. When I got there, I walked out to the back porch and sat down. The ocean was dark and calm. The wind was sharp. The stars were out. And for the first time in weeks, my thoughts slowed down. I remembered helping Granddad repaint the porch railing, both of us covered in white specks, laughing about how neither of us was cut out for this contractor stuff. I remembered him showing me how to change out an old breaker box, or the time we tore out the kitchen tiles and replaced them with slate. He'd believed in doing things yourself, in ownership, in legacy, not the kind you leave on Instagram, but the kind you build one careful decision at a time. That's when I made mine. I went back to work, not just at the firm, though I did dive into a new set of residential projects with a vengeance, but at the house, too. I filed the paperwork to secure both trusts. I hired a landscape architect to help plan a coastal preservation design for the property, which would make it ineligible for rental zoning. I installed a new security system and rewired the alarm with a remote access app. I even contacted a local nonprofit that organized educational field trips for inner-city kids, offering the house as a summer field site for marine biology students, something my grandfather would have loved. And the best part? None of this needed Kyle's approval. Not a single thing. He couldn't stop it. He didn't even know it was happening. I kept it quiet, like laying bricks in a foundation. No big announcements. No social media posts. Just quiet progress. And slowly, the weight lifted. Work became fulfilling again. My client list grew. I started getting invitations to speak at architecture seminars, even got quoted in a small magazine feature about sustainable coastal design. I took weekend trips up the coast, spent time reading, reconnected with old friends. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. Alone? Yes. But for once, being alone didn't feel like failure. It felt like freedom. And that's when Kyle made his next move. It was a Friday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, finishing a proposal draft, when I got a notification from the beach house security app. Front gate camera, motion detected. I opened the feed. There he was, Kyle, standing at the front gate with his arms crossed, wearing a smug expression and holding a piece of paper. His wife was in the car behind him. The kids weren't there. I watched as he pressed the intercom. "Nate," he said to the camera, "I know you can hear me." I didn't answer. He held up the paper. "This is a petition for shared ownership. I talked to a lawyer. If you want to do this the hard way, we can go to court. But once the judge sees you've been emotionally unstable, hostile toward your own family, and using the property for non-residential purposes, they'll consider that grounds for a forced equity split." I stared at the screen. He actually thought he could bluff his way into a legal claim. He didn't know about the zoning changes. He didn't know about the second trust. He didn't know about the nonprofit deal or the preservation contract. or the very airtight clause that gave me sole authority to determine what family use even meant. I watched as he pressed the intercom again. "This isn't over," he said. "You don't get to shut us out just because you're bitter and lonely. We're family, Nate. And if you don't open this gate, I swear." I ended the feed. And that's when I picked up the phone. Not to call Kyle, but to call my lawyer. "It's time," I told her. "Let's begin." She didn't even ask what I meant. We both knew. The Monday after Kyle tried to bluff his way into a court battle, I walked into my lawyer's office with a different posture. Straighter. Firmer. It's weird. I hadn't realized how much I'd been carrying until I finally set it down. The shame. The guilt. The decades of being the fallback son. The one who didn't get the spotlight because he didn't have the right family photo for the Christmas card. But after everything, the lies, the manipulation, the fake power of attorney stunt, I was done playing nice. It was time to fight fire with fire. Not with rage. With precision. Margot, my lawyer, had been waiting for me. Her office was a modest brick building near the harbor, nothing flashy, but her desk was always spotless and her mind razor-sharp. She slid a manila folder across the desk before I'd even sat down. "That's the preservation clause, finalized and signed by the county," she said. "Zoning is officially locked. No rentals. No subdivisions. No joint residential claims. That land is now legally protected as educational and environmental property unless otherwise revoked by you." I opened the folder and scanned the stamped document. It felt heavier than paper, like a sword I hadn't realized I'd been forging. "He can't touch it now," I said. "Not even with a wrecking ball," she replied. "The only way he could argue any claim to it is if you voluntarily gave up your rights. And after the fraudulent real estate stunt, that's not happening." I nodded. "Perfect. Now, let's go one step further." Margot raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "I want to make a statement," I said. "Not just a legal win. Something public. Something that puts an end to the idea that I'm the selfish one. That I'm the unstable one." She smiled slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that." And so the setup began. Step 1, documentation. We compiled every interaction between me and Kyle over the past year. The texts, the emails, the voicemails. The fake power of attorney attempt, which my real estate friend was more than happy to provide a written statement about. The footage from the security cam where Kyle threatened to take me to court. Every passive-aggressive group chat message. Every snide remark from Hannah pretending to just be concerned. It was a full dossier of narcissism, entitlement, and manipulation, neatly categorized in labeled folders. Step 2, the board meeting. Not a literal board meeting, a family one. That required a little finesse. I reached out to Aunt Lisa first. She had always been the one person in the family who seemed to straddle the line between impartiality and empathy. She didn't blindly defend Kyle, and she hadn't erased me from her life just because I didn't show up with a stroller and diaper bag. "Lisa," I said over the phone, "would you be willing to host a family dinner next weekend? Just the core group." There was a pause. "That depends. Is this about the house?" "Yes," I said, "but not in the way you think." She agreed. Step 3, setting the bait. I sent a text to Kyle. Short. Controlled. "Family dinner at Lisa's next Saturday. I'll be there. I think it's time we cleared the air." No explanation. No emotion. Just enough mystery to stir the pot. I didn't expect him to respond, and he didn't. But the read receipt was there, which meant he'd seen it. I could imagine the conversation that followed. Him showing Hannah the message, spinning theories about what I was planning. Him pacing their kitchen, wondering if I was bluffing or laying a trap. Good. Let him wonder. Let him sweat. In the days leading up to the dinner, I kept busy. I scheduled a meeting with the nonprofit and finalized the educational agreement. I posted an update on my firm's website about our newest eco-design project, a subtle nod to the Beach House initiative, but without naming names. I made sure everything was backed up. Every contract, every document, every recorded voicemail. Because Kyle wasn't just a spoiled sibling anymore. He was a liability, and he still didn't know I'd locked him out for good. The day of the dinner arrived, and I drove to Lisa's with a strange sense of calm. Not joy, not vengeance, just clarity. The kind that comes when you finally stop justifying your pain to people who benefit from your silence. Lisa's house was warm and bright, with the faint smell of rosemary chicken drifting from the kitchen. She greeted me at the door with a hug. No questions, no judgment. Just a quiet understanding. "They're already here," she said softly. Try to keep it civil. I smiled. No promises. In the dining room, I found them all. My parents, Kyle and Hannah. No kids, thank God. Even Uncle Tim and Cousin Mark had shown up, though they looked more like observers than participants. The room buzzed with tension, like everyone was waiting for the fuse to spark. Kyle was seated at the far end of the table, legs crossed, trying way too hard to look relaxed. Nathan, he said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. Glad you could join us. I ignored the tone and sat. I appreciate everyone coming, I said, my voice steady. I wanted to clear the air, but I also wanted to clarify a few things, legally and personally. My mom cut in before I could continue. Nate, honey, I really think. I held up a hand. Please, just listen. She went quiet. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file folder. Not the whole dossier, just the highlights. These are records of every attempt Kyle has made to claim ownership of my property, I said, including the forged documents submitted to a real estate agency. I also have a notarized statement from the agent involved. Hannah's face paled slightly. Kyle clenched his jaw but said nothing. I have video evidence of Kyle arriving at the property without permission, issuing threats, and stating his intention to pursue legal action based on a completely fabricated claim of emotional instability. Lisa's eyes widened. My dad leaned forward, elbows on the table, silent but watching closely. And just for clarity, I continued, the beach house isn't just a house. It's now part of a preservation trust. Zoned, protected, legally untouchable without my explicit permission, which Kyle will never have. Now Kyle spoke. So what? You came here to brag? To wave your little papers around and act like you're some genius? What's your endgame, Nate? Burn every bridge in the family just to prove a point. I looked him dead in the eyes. No, I came to make it clear that the old dynamic is over. You don't get to bully, guilt, or manipulate your way into things that don't belong to you. You've played the family man card like it's a shield, but being a parent doesn't give you a moral pass. My mother looked stunned. Nate, that's your brother. I turned to her. And I'm your son, but for some reason, I've never been treated like one. Just a backup account for when Kyle's life ran out of lives. She flinched at that. Good. She needed to. I stood and placed the final document on the table. The Educational Partnership Agreement. Starting this summer, the beach house will be used for marine biology workshops and conservation retreats. Granddad would have been proud. And no, there won't be room for family vacations anymore. Kyle pushed back from the table. You're insane, he muttered. Maybe, I said, but at least I'm done being your doormat. He looked like he wanted to explode, like he might knock over a glass again. But this time, there were too many witnesses, too many facts he couldn't bend. My dad finally spoke. Quietly. I warned you, Kyle. Kyle turned toward him. You're seriously siding with him? I'm siding with the truth. And then it happened. Kyle stormed out. No yelling, no final word, just a rush of air, a slammed door, and the echo of someone who had finally realized the game was over. But for me, it was just beginning. Because what Kyle didn't know, not yet, was that his attempt at fraud had tripped an entirely different wire. One with financial consequences. And next week, the fallout from that wire would arrive. In the form of a subpoena. By the time the subpoena hit Kyle's mailbox, I had already distanced myself from the emotional fallout. That didn't mean I didn't feel it. I did. But it came in short, sharp stabs now. Not the deep, aching kind that used to knock the wind out of me. He must have opened the envelope sometime in the early evening. I know this because I got a barrage of texts within the hour. The first few were furious, unhinged. What is this? Are you trying to ruin me? We're family, Nate. That last one almost made me laugh. Almost. But the most telling one came 20 minutes later. How much do you want to make this go away? There it was. Not a denial. Not a plea. A price. That's how Kyle always operated. If he couldn't guilt you, he'd buy his way out. Or at least try to. But this time, there wasn't an offer I'd accept. Because this time, I didn't want money. I wanted closure. Let me rewind, just for clarity. The subpoena wasn't for some courtroom soap opera. I wasn't dragging Kyle in front of a jury in a dramatic made-for-TV moment. That wasn't my style, and honestly, it wasn't necessary. What I did was more precise. I filed a civil complaint for attempted property fraud and identity misrepresentation, complete with supporting evidence from the real estate agent, the forged documents, and the camera footage. Margot, my lawyer, submitted everything with the county clerk's office, which triggered the subpoena and a formal court-ordered mediation hearing. Now here's the thing. I didn't need the court to award me anything. I already had the house, the trust, the zoning rights, and every legal document Kyle had no access to. But I wanted the record. I wanted a paper trail that would follow him, especially if he ever tried a similar stunt again with someone else. And more than anything, I wanted him to be confronted with the consequences of his actions in a way he couldn't spin with a half smile and a sob story. The hearing was scheduled 2 weeks out. That gave me time to prepare, not just logistically, but mentally. I spent those 2 weeks clearing my head, running along the coast in the early mornings, sketching new designs for the nonprofit's summer renovation plans at the beach house, even attending a local architecture panel where, weirdly enough, someone approached me about a potential book deal. Nothing huge, just a collection of essays about sustainable design and legacy builds. I almost said no. Then I remembered Granddad and how proud he would have been. I said yes. As for my family, well, that was a quieter storm. My mother left a voicemail the day after the subpoena was issued. Her tone was different this time. Quieter. Almost flat. Nate, I don't know what's happening anymore. I just want things to go back to normal. I didn't return the call because there was no normal to return to. Not when the normal was me being disposable, convenient, the emotionally available son who asked for nothing and gave everything, the invisible sibling who always smoothed things over while Kyle played the martyr. Let that version of me stay buried. The morning of the hearing, I showed up in a charcoal gray blazer and jeans, professional, but not trying to impress anyone. Kyle arrived with a different strategy. Full suit, polished shoes, hair slicked back. He looked like he was auditioning for a political campaign. Hannah was with him. She wore sunglasses indoors, like this was an episode of Real Housewives and not a county mediation hearing. Margot met me in the lobby. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. Better than ever. Inside, the conference room was neutral and beige, with a long oval table and 2 sets of chairs on either side. A court-appointed mediator sat at the head, a calm woman in her 50s with a clipboard and an expression that said she'd seen every kind of family implosion imaginable. The hearing began with standard procedures: introductions, the reading of the complaint, confirmation of attendance. Then we got to the evidence. Margot laid it all out. Chronologically, factually, calmly. The forged documents, the real estate agent's testimony, the video of Kyle at the gate, the audio clip of his threats, the property zoning paperwork, the signed trust agreements, both of them. Kyle didn't say a word. Neither did Hannah. The longer Margot spoke, the more color drained from their faces. You could tell they hadn't expected this much preparation, this much proof. They thought I was bluffing, just like always. When it was Kyle's turn to respond, he cleared his throat and tried to sound composed. "This is all a misunderstanding," he began. "I was trying to protect a piece of family property. Nate's been unstable lately, and we were concerned that he might do something irrational." "Irrational, like calling the police?" the mediator asked without blinking. Kyle flinched. "I didn't mean." "I have a question," she said, turning to him directly. "Were you, at any point, granted legal authority to act on behalf of your brother regarding the property?" Kyle hesitated. "No, but I assumed. That's all I need. Thank you." The rest of the hearing was a formality. The mediator concluded that while no criminal charges were being pursued, the civil complaint would remain on record, and any future attempts to access or claim the property without legal documentation would be considered grounds for escalation, including a potential restraining order or fraud investigation. In short, he'd been warned. In writing, on record, for life. As we stood to leave, Kyle tried to make one last move. He leaned in, low enough that only I could hear. "You think this makes you better than me? You'll always be alone in that house, just like you were always alone in this family." I smiled. Not cruelly, just with quiet certainty. I'd rather be alone with integrity than surrounded by people who only show up when they want something. He blinked. Then I walked out. The fallout came quickly after that. Hannah started showing up to Sunday dinners without Kyle. Word had spread about the hearing, not just in the family, but in the community. People talk, especially in coastal towns. And when they found out he'd tried to forge documents to steal his own brother's house, the tide turned fast. He wasn't fired from his job. His father-in-law owned the company, but he lost several clients. One of them emailed me to say they were no longer comfortable working with someone who behaved so recklessly. As for Mom, she went quiet again. Not in the cold way. More like someone who'd been hit with a truth she couldn't unsee. 2 weeks after the hearing, she sent a box to my apartment. Inside was an old family photo album, one I hadn't seen in years. Tucked into the first page was a note. I don't know if I ever saw you clearly, Nate. I'm sorry it took losing something for Kyle to see you. But I see you now. And I hope someday you'll let me make it right. I haven't responded yet. I don't know if I will. Some wounds heal, but the scar tissue never forgets. Still, I kept the album. That summer, the beach house came alive again. Not with family barbecues or forced holiday brunches, but with the sound of laughter from kids discovering tide pools, college students measuring erosion levels, volunteers planting dune grass. I partnered with a marine biology professor who brought his students for fieldwork. I gave a talk on coastal preservation. I even let them name the new workshop cabin they built behind the house, the Williams Retreat. They asked me to speak at the dedication. I kept it short. This place was built with love. It survived storms, selfishness, and silence. And now, it gets to give something back. I didn't mention Kyle. I didn't need to. Because the best revenge wasn't legal. It wasn't even personal. It was purpose. And I had finally found mine. As I stood on the porch that evening, watching the sunset bleed across the water, I realized something. They didn't take anything from me. They revealed me. And I was never going to shrink back again. Not for them. Not for anyone.